Welcome back to The Overlook. I'm your host, Dominique Hoffman, and today I am joined by Emily Milliken of the Atlantic Council's N7 initiative to discuss I2U2, which just convened in India, as well as its cooperation with the Abraham Accords and just review of where the Abraham Accords are at now, 100 plus days into the Trump administration's second term, and what we can expect moving forward. We've seen talks with Iran taking place and also between Israel and Hamas to come to some sort of agreement for the conclusion of the war in Gaza. All of this has implications for the region, as well as seeing the Abraham Accords expand and be fully realized to the potential that they were envisioned to fulfill. With that, I'm going to encourage everyone to like, comment, and subscribe to the Fearless Project channel, and also check out N7. N7 has some amazing fellows that provides some great commentary and analysis as to what's going on in the region. And so if you're interested in in-depth analysis, I'm going to also link their website in the description box down below. And with that, let's get into today's episode. Emily Milliken, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I love to be here with our friends at Philos.
We've had some amazing adventures recently in India, which we are going to talk about. But before we get into that and N7's initiatives, especially now we have 100 days of the Trump administration, Trump 2.0, to kind of look at as well. Maybe you could just tell the audience that might not be familiar, although I'm sure that they are, with Atlantic Council and N7.
Yeah, so I work at Atlantic Council at the N7 Initiative, which is a partnership between the Atlantic Council and the Jeffrey M. Talpins Foundation. N7 was founded right after the Abraham Accords came about to broaden and deepen relationships between Israel and Arab and Muslim countries. We started out working with and convening countries that had already normalized relations with Israel. So you're looking at UAE, you're looking at Morocco, and also Sudan and Jordan and Egypt that had pre-existing deals. But now we're actually expanding beyond that and expanding beyond the Middle East and bringing in new partners and seeing how we can continue to grow those relationships and deepen U.S. national security outside of the United States at the same time.
I think it's a great place to start. So with the Abraham Accords, obviously now we have Trump 2.0, but we also have October 7th. I know that the I2U2 group meeting that happened in India recently was the first time that those countries had convened post October 7th. So can you talk maybe about how that disrupted those talks and if that has been like a focus of these dialogues?
For sure. So I2U2 was announced all the way back in July 2022 during a virtual summit, and it was attended by everyone from Prime Minister Modi from India to Yair Lapid from Israel to Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan from UAE, and then also President Joe Biden. But it was conceptualized and really thought about a whole year earlier at a meeting of the foreign ministers of the four countries. They really had all these big ideas, right? We're going to do space cooperation and we're going to do food security cooperation and all these things. The last time that they met was actually in September, right before October 7th happened on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. And it really was disruptive. Since then, progress on any of these exciting, amazing initiatives and also meeting on this multilateral format has really stalled. They actually haven't successfully been able to meet since then. And even when the countries themselves have been trying to meet, on the sidelines of other major conferences like the Racina Dialogues, they just haven't been able to pull it off. And so we at Ensign really saw this as an opportunity. We saw after Modi came to visit Trump, they released a statement, a joint statement that said that they needed to have a ministerial meeting on I2U2 in 6 months. And so we really thought, how can we be helpful to these governments, to our friends in these governments, and set out to convene all of these leaders together so that they could really have what ended up being a big planning meeting, a coordination meeting to see where the interest still was. Were they still wanting to do I2U2 anymore? Did they only want to work on a bilateral, measure? And It was just a great success. We felt very fortunate to be able to bring, high level leadership from all four countries together in New Delhi. And it was also concurrent with JD Vance's visit. So it was a big time to be in New Delhi for the N7 initiative.
That's amazing. What were some of the key takeaways of the initiative?
I think the biggest key takeaway that we saw was that they're still very committed to this alliance. They're very committed to working together on this multilateral format, and they want to continue to grow and expand it. Some of the things that they really talked about was that, none of their relationships have broken down, and this is what Evan has seen writ large, is that while on the public sphere it might look like the relationships have been severed or they're not talking, no, on a bilateral level they're still talking, they're still meeting in
Mm,
quiet, they're still dedicated to this, but it's been difficult to meet publicly. And so
mm,
we saw that they're still committed to it, and that we also saw that they're really interested in expanding it into new and exciting ways. So, one of the things that was obviously top of mind was the terrorist attack that had happened in Kashmir while we were in India, and all the different leaders expressed their condolences to our Indian participants and their prayers and thoughts for their family members. But then they also wanted to talk about how can we cooperate in areas of counterterrorism? How can we cooperate in areas of defense? How can, the different expertise levels apply, and how can we move that? Outside of that, they also talked about making trade just easier in general. Things like how can we create one central area for all trade information so that it cuts down on time and it cuts down on cost? There's also been a discussion about projects on like food security, renewable energy, and obviously, like I said, space has been a big one. And while, a lot of these projects are still kind of unrealized, the N7 initiative is going to continue to the I2U2 group to really bring together these governments, but also our private sector contacts to really
mm.
operationalize what an important alliance and really connect these government partners with key private sector contacts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a testament to what you guys are doing as well, that October 7th hasn't disrupted, or, I mean, it's disrupted, but hasn't severed those ties or that willingness to engage multilaterally and also with the private sectors to create increased interconnectedness and shared security interests. Before we talk about the Abraham Accords, because that's also very top of mind for me now, post 100 days of Trump 2.0, could you characterize what the Israel India relationship looks like, maybe before October 7 and then today?
For sure. So India and Israel actually established full diplomatic relationship all the way back in 1992. And it started from, like we've seen with some of our other Abraham Accords partners, something very small that steadily evolved into something stronger. They have cooperation in defense and in technology, and Israel has been a major seller of defense equipment to India, and has also provided it with some advanced agricultural techniques and water management solution. And this is a lot of what Evan is really about, is how can we take expertise and policies and things that one of our partners has, and help transfer it to another. So the India-Israel relationship for a long time has really just showed that. But this relationship up until I2U remained largely bilateral, and India was really focused on balancing ties between Israel and also the Arab world. And so after the formation of the I2U2 group, it really was a big shift towards this type of multilateral cooperation that we see, the desire to work together in a variety of sectors, but also bring in the UAE and bring in the US, and no longer seeing a desire to have to balance the priorities between Israel and the Arab world, that, everything could kind of work together in one way. And the framework really kind of elevated the India Israel relationship, especially because India and the UAE are quite close. India and the United States are quite close. So it's constantly making the thing bigger and deeper and more important. And, you know, since October 10th, India has really, again, kind of struggled to balance its relationship with Israel, but it's remained committed. It's remained committed to the bilateral alliance. It hasn't, stepped back its relationship. It hasn't stepped back I2U2, and there just hasn't necessarily been as much public facing activities. But India was quick and made sure to express its sympathy and support for the Israelis, to, condemn Hamas and call for, but also, to call for restraint and to send humanitarian aid to the Palestinians. And so I think that Indian leadership really views I2U2 as well as its relationship with Israel as something that's really important, but it has these kind of long-standing support for the Palestinian cause. It has a large majority of Muslims now. I think they just surpassed, they're the largest Muslim majority, majority of Muslims in the world over Indonesia. And so they've been able to continue to balance that. And I think that the relationship will only get stronger and closer, especially when we activate I2U2.
That's incredible. And I think, as you really astutely pointed out, the Abraham Accords kind of provided that framework that is acceptable to still engage with Israel despite the conflict that's happening. I've actually been shocked. So since the last time we talked, I thought the Abraham Accords would kind of be the center focus of a lot of the foreign policy conversation that's happening during this second Trump administration. And I haven't seen too much discussion or talk on it. Obviously, it's only been 100 days, but could you give us a summary of where the Abraham Accords are now? I know you work with a lot of other Arab countries in the region. Do you feel that there's an interest or a friendliness to expand the Accords, and what would that look like for the region?
I think there's definitely an interest, there's definitely readiness. It's just all about timing. It's all about, what people want to be seen publicly and, as Trump puts it, the art of the deal, right? So I think I'm not surprised that nobody has joined yet, but I do think that there's positive momentum and it's quiet, but it's still coming. I think, Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords is still something that's very much a possibility, something that could happen soon or later, depending on how these negotiations go. Saudi Arabia and Israel have long-standing relations that are just very quiet, and they're very focused on other things like intelligence sharing. And it's not like there's no Israeli technology in Saudi Arabia. They just might have to sell it through a different company or something. So it's not like the relationships there don't exist. They're long-standing and they're ongoing, but with the war going on, and even though now that it's starting to quiet down, Saudi Arabia is really worried about, its populace and how does it make this acceptable and also popular. The leaders in Saudi Arabia, MBS, really wants to stay in power. So they're constantly gaming through, they never had an Arab Spring. They're constantly gaming through, what can we do to keep everybody happy, keep everything calm, keep everything quiet, and especially with other fronts, that Saudi Arabia is involved with, like Yemen heating back up, having opportunities to do things that could possibly upset their population. They don't want to have too many things on fire at the same time. But I definitely think it's still very much in discussion, and it's still very much something that will inevitably happen. We also have other nations that are, interested, that other nations that are committed. And then there's also other nations that basically, once Saudi Arabia joins, they're going to be next in line. So we look at, within the region, we have countries like Oman. The Omanis have a very different aspect because they're not Sunni and they're not Shia, and they have their own religious, story that makes them quite tolerant to all religions. And because of that, we see them as people that would be quite eager. But similar to Saudi Arabia, they're looking for movement, positive momentum on a Palestinian state because they are very committed to that as well. We also see a lot of talk about countries in Central Asia. We see talk about Azerbaijan. We see talk about Armenia, and then maybe even extending into countries like Kazakhstan that you would never think of in the concept of, the Middle East and think of having relationships with Israel. But both Armenia and Azerbaijan have had relationship with Israel and the Israeli government for a long time. Azerbaijan especially acts as a really important counterbalance to Iran in the region and has been pursuing being a part of the Abraham Accords for a long time, even though they already have normalized relations with Israel. It's a very interesting thing, but because the Azeris see the Abraham Accords as this like cool club, and that's the Abraham Accords is something that people want to be a part of, not just to normalize relations with Israel, but also because of the amazing tangible benefits that they see from being a part of the Abraham Accords that benefit the people in their region, the people in their country, and around the world. So we see a lot of talk on that. Obviously, Indonesia is also a big conversation as well. In the past year, there's been some shakeups in the Indonesian government that could, allow for that to change. Indonesia, as such a large, previously the largest Muslim, population in the world, really sees itself as a leader, similar to Saudi Arabia for Muslims around the world. So when we start to see, and we have seen to some level, positive communication from Muslim leaders in Indonesia and Saudi Arabia, it's not just speaking about, pro-Israel and pro-Muslim Jewish relationships in their own country, but it's around the world. It's really, it's like the butterfly effect where it takes something that's so small and it continues on. So that's really exciting for us as well. And there's also, countries across Africa that are interested in being involved, to increase their relationships with the United States and to increase their relationship with Israel and get some of those, again, tangible benefits they see. And it goes beyond a security pact or, money or weapons or whatever it is with the United States. It's the relationship and the things that those can also build. And that's a lot of what we try to do here at N7. We try really take these ideas and policies and this theoretical framework and turn it into action. And how can we actually make these relationships real?
And as you said, it is more than a security pact, but I do have to ask about the security side of it, just because it has been the focus of the Trump administration this 100+ days in, which is negotiating with Iran. Has that impacted the Abraham Accords? Do you think that Saudi Arabia is holding off to see what happens with those negotiations, and how does it impact the region?
I think it definitely has an impact, right? Especially on the Saudis and on the Emiratis, on the whole region, because especially for the Saudis, though, before entering the Abraham Accords, but all our partners in the region are really looking to see what kind of a agreement can we come to with Iran. Is it going to end up being stronger than JCPOA like we've been promised? And if it is, then that's okay, and we can continue to work and trust the United States. But then the worry is also, if it's not stronger, do they also need to, couch things? Do they need to also work with Iran and create some sort of a relationship there? The more that they have investment to Iran or Iranian investment there or money running through them, the less they know, the less likely they are to have Iranian strikes or Iranian proxies operating in their countries. And so I think it works a little bit into the Abraham Accords, disfavor to expand, but it also is impacting our allies who are already members of the Abraham Accords. Everybody's on the edge of their seat to see how strong this new deal with Iran will be. What will the focus be? Will it just be on the nuclear aspect, or will it, our allies in the Gulf and in the region are really calling for it needs to be more. It needs to be more than just dismantling of Iran's nuclear program. It also needs to focus on the proxies and some of the other concerning Iranian activity in the region that impacts them. Everybody's concerned about a Iran nuclear program that could have a nuclear bomb and strike anywhere in the world. But for our allies in the region, people who are interested in joining the Abraham Accords are already, targeted because they're part of the Abraham Accords. The question of, is a new Iranian proxy going to pop up in my country? Or are the Houthis going to restart strikes on Saudi Arabia and the UAE? Or are we going to see, Houthi fighters on moving outside of Yemen? That's something that's top of mind, and they're trying to figure out, like, can they really trust the United States to come to this stronger, better, longer deal that we've all been promised and that we all hope for. And I think the Trump administration is working very hard to try and get for us.
Yeah, absolutely. In closing, I would love to turn to Trump 2.0 and just hear what Evan is doing in light of this administration and their goals and how you are working to reinvigorate the Abraham Accords for the remainder of his term and beyond. But really, the work is great to be done now.
Yeah, so N7, we work across, party lines, we work across administrations. We've had, directors who have been in the Biden administration, directors who've been in the Trump administration. And so we're really happy to, work with anybody and everybody. But we really recognize that with the Abraham Accords being one of the chief wins, and you put it that way, of the first Trump administration, that this is a really great time for us to be working on expanding the accords, working with new countries, and deepening those existing relationships and things like I2U2 and other follow-on projects. Um, it's been a lot, not only are we working on this kind of I2U2 angle, we're also working on projects like bringing in Israel to the IMEC. IMEC is the Israel, Middle East, Europe corridor, and IMEC and I2U2 could kind of work together completely. They could be separate. Right now, Israel's not a named member of IMEC, but if it would be a great economic opportunity, and it would be a great opportunity to really continue to integrate Israel within the broader Middle East, but also with India and also with Europe, and cut down, time and cost. It would be like a 30 to 40% cost savings on bringing goods from India all the way to Europe. So we're working on other follow-on projects like that, as well as, like I said, bringing policy recommendations to these countries and how to get things to work. Been really lucky with the new Trump administration. We always work with the US and our partners in the region as well, and we run everything by them, and we want to make sure that they're always on board. We always work in coordination with them, but we've been really lucky this time that they are now really interested in reinvigorating and working on the accords again, whereas we saw the Biden administration was just very focused on ending the war in Gaza, which obviously is a huge concern that the Trump administration is also working on. But us here at N7, we'd like to think that things can still happen in the shadows and behind closed doors, even when things are tough publicly. And so that's what we've been continuing to work to do. And the Trump administration has really echoed that as well. And we've had some great activities involving the admin and involving our partners in places like Munich at the Munich Security Conference, where we felt very lucky to be able to bring everybody together prior to this big India summit and talk about this. Where we, first came up with this idea to bring everybody together was at a table of our partners and asking, would this be helpful? Is this a good gap for us to fill? And they said yes, and we hope to continue to work on this I2U2 and obviously other exciting Abraham Accords projects.
Absolutely. Well, Emily, Evan, and the Trump administration working both together and then in your separate initiatives have done so much in the last 100 days. So I'm excited to continue to see all the work that both of you guys do. Do you have any media that you could point the audience to follow the work that you're doing? Because I know that you guys come out with stuff quite often.
Yes, follow an initiative on X and also our website, n7initiative.org. We are always putting out things, videos, interviews, and then we recently launched our N7 Research Institute. So we're also putting out a lot of scholarship on these topics that we've been talking about. What policy recommendations, what is the Trump administration doing? How do we look at the Abraham Accords and beyond? So those are all good places to follow us and read interesting things from some very interesting and very senior authors that we are so lucky to get to work with on the public facing things and also on the private side.
Amazing. And I'll link all of that in the description box down below for the audience. Emily, thank you so much. I'll see you next time you join me.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.